You hear that acronym all the time, right? API? It gets thrown around in tech news, in job descriptions, pretty much everywhere. But what in the world is it, actually? Well, turns out it's the hidden engine behind almost every single digital service you use. So let's dive in and finally demystify what an API really is.
Here's the game plan for this explainer. We're going to start with the big idea, then see how APIs are the secret sauce powering the apps on your phone. We'll break down the three main types, take a peek at how they talk to each other, and then we'll walk through a step-by-step guide on how you can actually use one yourself.
All right, first things first. Let's get right to the core of it, cut through the jargon, and figure out what we're really talking about.
Yeah, this is the big question, isn't it? So let's break it down with a definition that actually makes sense.
Okay, so officially, API stands for Application Programming Interface. But honestly, that's not super helpful. A much better way to think about it is this. It's just a specific chunk of code that's really good at doing one particular job. You give it a certain input, and you know you're going to get a predictable output every single time.
And here's the best analogy for real. Think of an API as a helpful middleman. It lets two different apps talk to each other and share information, but here's the key. Neither app needs to know all the messy, complicated internal code of the other. It just handles the communication.
And the way this middleman works is actually super simple. It's just a request and a response. One application, we'll call it the client, sends a request for some information. The API gets that request, does its thing, and then sends back a neatly packaged, structured response. That's pretty much it. That's the entire loop.
Okay, let's move on. We're going to see how this kind of abstract idea becomes the hidden engine that makes the apps on your phone actually, well, work. This is where it all becomes real.
So most of the apps you use are split into two parts. You've got the front end, that's everything you see and touch, the buttons, the colors, the layout, the pretty user interface. But the back end, that's where the real magic happens. It's basically a whole collection of APIs doing all the heavy lifting, handling the logic, grabbing data, and talking to servers. Uber is a perfect example of this. When you open the app and tap Request Ride, you're not just using one big program. Nope. Your app is making a whole bunch of different API calls to Uber's back end. There's one API to find nearby drivers, another to calculate the route and the fare, a totally separate one to process your payment. You get the idea. It's like a symphony of specialized little programs all working together. So now that we have a feel for what they do, let's look at the different flavors they come in. Because, not all APIs are created equal. They fall into a few distinct categories depending on who gets to use them. We're going to focus on the three big ones. You've got your open or public APIs, your internal or private APIs, and something called code interfaces. First up, open APIs. This is where things get really cool. A company like YouTube basically opens up a little window into their data and lets any developer in the world use it. This means people can build totally new apps on top of YouTube's service, like a custom search tool or an analytics dashboard. It creates this whole amazing ecosystem of new ideas. Then you have the complete opposite, internal APIs. Think of these as the secret sauce inside a giant company like Amazon. They are absolutely not for the public. Instead, they're used to connect all of Amazon's own complex systems. Inventory, shipping, payments, you name it. It's how they manage that massive operation. And this last type, it's a little different. It's not about connecting websites or servers at all. It's about the tools built right into a programming language. So when a Python programmer types numbers.sort, they're using an API. It's a code interface. It gives them a super simple way to use a really complex sorting algorithm without having to write it themselves from scratch.
Okay, so we know APIs are middlemen, and they come in different types. But how do they actually talk to each other? What's the secret language they're using? Let's take a quick look at their communication styles.
This chart gives us a nice little cheat sheet. The one you'll see most often today is REST. It's lightweight, flexible, and just perfect for web and mobile apps. You might also run into SOAP, which is a bit older and more rigid, but it's super common in places that need high security, like banking. And then there's the new kid on the block, GraphQL, which is incredibly flexible and lets an app ask for exactly the data it needs, no more, no less. All right, that's enough theory. Let's get our hands dirty. How does someone actually find and use an API in the real world? Turns out it's a pretty logical process. Here are the 6 basic steps. First, you find an API that has the data you want. Then, and this is probably the most important step, you actually read the documentation to learn the rules. After that, you'll usually need an API key to prove who you are. Then you test it out, write the code to plug it into your project, and finally, you build in some safeguards to handle any errors that might pop up.
Now, that step about authentication is absolutely crucial. Most public APIs won't just let anyone waltz in. You have to sign up and get a unique API key. You can think of it like your personal password. It tells the service you have permission to be there, and it lets them track how much you're using it so nobody abuses the system. So before you write a whole bunch of code, you'll probably want to test the API with a simple tool like curl, right from your command line. It might look a little technical, but all you're doing is building the request URL, telling it you want the weather for New York, and plugging in your personal API key. You hit enter, and you get the raw data right back. It's a great way to see if everything is working.
And once you confirm that the test works, the next step is to bring that right into your application. This little snippet here shows a simple Python script doing the exact same thing we just did with curl. It uses a library to send the request, it gets a response back, and then it turns that raw data into something useful that the app can actually work with, like, say, displaying the current temperature on the screen.
So there you have it. From a simple idea to a real-world example, APIs are literally the invisible threads that weave our entire digital world together. They're the middlemen, the translators, and the engines that make all this incredible technology possible. So the real question is, now that you know the secret, now that you can see these connections everywhere, what new connection could you build?